The busy office was buzzing with noise, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, employees rushing to meet deadlines, when a young black intern noticed a man standing quietly near the reception desk. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't speaking. Instead, he seemed to be waiting, lost in the noise around him. Without hesitation, the intern walked over and began signing to him in fluent sign language. The man's face lit up with surprise and relief as he finally had someone to communicate with. But what the intern didn't know was that this man wasn't just any visitor. He was the company's elusive and powerful boss, silently observing everything. If this moment caught your attention, tap like to support more powerful stories like this. Subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in the intern's place? Your thoughts could inspire someone else. The intern's name was Malik, a bright and determined college student who had just started his summer internship at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Every morning he arrived early, dressed sharply, eager to prove himself. As one of the only black employees in the office, and the youngest, Malik knew that eyes were on him. He had already noticed the subtle glances, the way some co-workers spoke to him more formally than others, and the occasional assumption that he was there to deliver coffee rather than handle reports. Still, he kept his head high, determined to let his work speak louder than their doubts. On that particular day, the office was especially hectic. A major presentation was scheduled for later in the afternoon, and senior managers were running around preparing. Malik had been assigned small but important tasks, updating spreadsheets, printing copies, and helping set up the conference room. But as he passed the reception desk, he noticed a man waiting patiently, standing just a little apart from everyone else. The man was tall, dressed simply but neatly, and he looked calm despite the chaos around him. Something about his body language caught Malik's attention. The way his eyes scanned the room, the way he tried to catch someone's attention without speaking. Then Malik noticed his hands moving slightly. Subtle signs, the kind only someone fluent in sign language would recognize. Without hesitating, Malik stepped forward and greeted him in American Sign Language, asking if he needed help. The man's entire face changed, as if someone had just turned on a light inside him. Finally, someone had noticed him, had taken the time to understand him. What Malik didn't know was that this small act of kindness was about to change the course of his entire internship, and maybe even his future. Malik guided the man toward a quieter corner of the lobby, away from the frantic movement of the office. Using sign language, he asked if the man was here for the meeting. The visitor nodded and signed back that he was here to observe operations before a major decision was finalized. Malik offered to notify the managers, but the man shook his head. He preferred to wait, watching the employees work without disrupting them. Malik stayed with him for a few minutes, making light conversation in signs, asking if he wanted water, explaining what the staff was rushing around for. For Malik, it was second nature. His younger sister was deaf, and he had learned sign language years ago to make sure she never felt left out of conversations. But for everyone else in the office, what Malik was doing seemed unusual. From across the room, a few employees noticed. Some whispered to each other, confused about why Malik was wasting time on a random visitor when there was so much work to be done. A senior assistant rolled her eyes and muttered that Malik was probably showing off. One of the managers, clearly stressed, approached Malik and sharply told him to get back to his assigned duties. Malik hesitated. He didn't want to abandon the man, who still hadn't been properly greeted by anyone else. So, he respectfully signed to the visitor that he would return shortly and hurried off to finish his tasks. As he walked away, he could feel the weight of judgmental eyes on him. Co-workers whispering, questioning why the intern was chatting with strangers when the company was on a deadline. But Malik couldn't ignore the way the visitor had looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and quiet admiration. Something told him that this moment mattered more than anyone realized. Later that afternoon, the conference room filled with staff and executives for the big presentation. Just before it began, the same man Malik had greeted walked in, and the entire room went silent. People exchanged startled glances. The visitor walked to the head of the table and took a seat reserved for only the highest-ranking person in the company. Murmurs spread through the staff as they realized who he was. The company's elusive founder and majority owner, known for rarely appearing in person. Malik's heart pounded. He hadn't just greeted a random guest. He had been the first employee to acknowledge the most important person in the company. And soon, everyone would learn just how much that small gesture had meant. The conference room grew tense as the boss sat quietly, scanning the faces around the table. He didn't speak. Instead, he raised his hands and began signing. A stunned hush fell over the room. No one moved. It quickly became obvious that very few people in the room understood him, except Malik, who instinctively began interpreting his words aloud for the rest of the staff. He signed that he had arrived early that morning to observe how his company treated people, visitors, clients, and even each other. He explained that his deafness was not a secret, but that he often stayed in the background, watching. What he had witnessed had been telling. Almost everyone had been too busy or too impatient to notice him, except Malik. The boss went on to say that Malik's decision to approach him, to speak to him in his own language, had been more than just polite. It had been deeply respectful. It showed empathy, awareness, and initiative, qualities he valued above all else in his company. Then, in front of everyone, he commended Malik for what he called true leadership. Malik's co-workers stared at him in disbelief. Just hours earlier, they had dismissed his actions as a distraction. Now, those same actions were being praised by the highest authority in the company. Some of them looked ashamed, others impressed. Malik sat frozen for a moment, then nodded respectfully, his chest tightening with pride and relief. The boss signed one final statement, that a company's greatness wasn't measured only by profit margins, but by how its people treated others, especially those who were different. And in that moment, Malik realized that his small act of kindness had turned into something far bigger than he ever imagined. The room erupted into quiet applause, not because anyone had been instructed to clap, but because they felt the weight of what had just happened. Malik's heart pounded as his co-workers looked at him differently. No longer the quiet intern in the background, but someone whose actions had just set the tone for the entire company. For the first time since he started, he felt truly seen. After the meeting, the boss motioned for Malik to stay behind. Through signs, he told Malik that he wanted him to be part of a new initiative, a diversity and inclusion program that would ensure no visitor or employee ever felt ignored or excluded again. Malik could hardly believe it. Not only had his simple act of kindness been recognized, but it was now shaping a company-wide policy that would impact countless others. As Malik left the office that day, the atmosphere felt different. Several co-workers approached him, some to apologize for doubting him earlier, others simply to thank him for bridging the communication gap that none of them had even considered addressing. Malik didn't hold grudges. He just smiled and reminded them that sometimes the smallest actions could make the biggest difference. That evening, as Malik walked home, he thought about his little sister, who had once told him she wished the world would take the time to understand her instead of treating her like a problem to be solved. Today, he had helped create that kind of world, even if only in one company. Stories like Malik's remind us that empathy costs nothing, yet it has the power to change everything. One person noticing, one person taking a moment to care, can shift an entire culture. Would you have taken the time to greet that visitor, even when everyone else ignored him? Or would you have walked past, too busy to notice? Let this story be a reminder. The smallest gestures can spark the biggest changes.